am Sadie Dingfelder, and I'm going to recap the pilot episode of the new Zachary Quinto show called Brilliant Minds. Brilliant Minds on NBC or Peacock streaming is a new show, and it is very much like an old show, House. It's a medical procedural starring a brilliant doctor who is socially awkward and his team of misfit interns. And every week they have 2 medical mysteries to solve. So this is the first episode, and it's going to be a little bit different than the other episodes because we have to meet all the characters. So in the first scene, what happens is we see a old man in a hospital. He's pretty unresponsive. And an orderly comes in and does something, gives him some water, leaves, and we see Dr. Wolf hiding behind the door. And he's holding a suit, and he says, Mr. Whatever, get dressed now and get in those tux. And so then we see him riding with that patient on his back on a motorcycle, and they go to a wedding. And it becomes clear that the old dude is not very with it. He can't recognize his daughter at the wedding. And so the daughter wants him sort of shuttered away and hidden because she's embarrassed. And it's the granddaughter's wedding, by the way. So Dr. Wolf, I guess, ignores her and sits down Grandpa at the piano and starts to play a song. And Grandpa's like, "You're doing that poorly." And so the old Alzheimer's patient starts playing the song on the piano and singing beautifully. It's a Beach Boys song. Everyone is just rapt, right? I mean, there's Grandpa. He seems fully with it. He's performing at his granddaughter's wedding. It's amazing. This never happened in the real Oliver Sacks's life, as far as I know, but he did break a patient out of the hospital and give her a motorcycle ride because she was dying, and that was her last wish. We also see the world from Dr. Wolf's perspective for a second, where everyone's faces are sort of blurry, and that is because he's face blind. So this is actually not what faces look like to face blind people. If you want to know what faces look like to us, just turn a regular face upside down, and you will see that you can't recognize it as quickly because the features don't hang together in quite the same way. That's basically how we see faces. Not literally upside down, obviously, but they're not blurry. Like, we can see them just as sharply as you can. We just can't tell the difference between faces. Next scene, we are in a boardroom, in the hospital boardroom, and Dr. Wolf gets fired from his job for breaking off the patient. They say that the family's suing for him doing that. And then the hospital admin says, "You want to change how your patients see the world?" And Oliver Wolf says, "I want to change how the world sees my patients." It's called an anti-metaboly, and it is only the first that we will see in this episode. Next scene is just to establish that Dr. Wolf is friends with this black woman. She shows up. She's a doctor too. Her name's Dr. Carol Pierce. She says, we have this crazy patient. I want you to come see him. And he's like, "I can't go to your hospital." And she basically offers him a job at the hospital. And he's like, "No, I can't work there." But we don't know why. Dr. Carol, by the way, says that this patient, which is going to be our big mystery for the week, had a temporal lobectomy and for her epilepsy. And this is not really something that happens anymore. You would not take out someone's entire right temporal lobe. Now they really get the focal point of the seizures as small as possible. They don't want to take out a lot of brain. Random scene where Dr. Wolf jumps in, takes a swim in the Hudson. He does this. This is actually something Dr. Oliver Sacks did, not in the Hudson, but in around City Island and Long Island Sound. So we get a flashback to his dad coaching him on swimming, and then he looks at his friends. He can't tell them, or the other kids. And Dr. Wolf is like, I'm sorry, his dad, Papa Wolf, gives him the tip to focus on distinguishing features in order to tell people apart. This is pretty good advice if you have a kid who's face blind, but make sure you also tell them to not say out loud people's distinguishing features, because people can be sensitive about that. The next scene is Wolf showing up at Bronx General, and Carol's giving him a tour, and she says, as you can see, we are understaffed and overcrowded, but we do not see that at all, especially in subsequent episodes. This appears to be a very small hospital with very few patients and very old equipment. Anyway, she assigns him 4 interns, and he's like, "I didn't want interns." Actually, the real Dr. Sacks loved having students, but Dr. Wolf is like, "No," because he's like Dr. House, and he's like, they're going to hate me. And Dr. Carol's like, if you told them that you were face blind and not just an asshole, they would like you. And he's like, "No, I'm not going to do that, because my mom taught me to hide mental disorders." That's not what he says, but that's what he learns, and that's what we learn as an audience in subsequent flashbacks. Now we get to meet the interns. Each of them has exactly one personality trait. There is Dr. Erica, and she is a tryhard, so we'll call her Dr. Tryhard. There is Dana, who does drugs, so Dr. Dana Druggy. There's a stressed out white guy named Van, and we'll call him Dr. Emo. And then there's the intern Jock Jacob, and we will call him Dr. Jock. They're in a locker room, it looks like. Dr. Wolf shows up, he's in a towel, and so it's kind of like a sexy time moment. Everyone's like, "Whoa," they make a big unit joke. seems inappropriate. Awkward moment is broken by a fracas in the hallway, and we see this beautiful redhead like being chased by orderlies, tackled. They're about to give her some sort of sedative, and so Dr. Wolf intervenes. He's wearing clothes now, and she says, these people, like, I went in for brain surgery, and then when I came out, they were replaced by children with imposters. Anyone who has ever seen a medical procedural TV show, such as Scrubs or New Amsterdam or Chicago Med, should know what our woman has immediately. Also, anyone who's taken a neuroscience or psychology class. Everyone is like, we've never heard of this, because they live in a different universe. Anyway, Dr. Wolf now wants to go visit Hannah in her home, and all the interns want to come with him. So they all pile into his old Volvo. That gives them the opportunity to have a little chat where Dr. Wolf explains why they're going to her home. He says, ask not what disease the person has, ask what person the disease has, which is our anti-metaboly number 2 for this episode. Also, we have one code blue. But that's like when a patient gets disorderly. It always happens right before a commercial. Okay. We're visiting Hannah, and I swear, like, we just saw her a minute ago in the hospital, having just come out of brain surgery. Her beautiful red hair, by the way, has not been shaved, which seems like that definitely would have happened if they're taking out her entire right temporal lobe. That's like a big chunk of brain. Anyway, and also, there's boxes all over her house, like she's just moved in, and she's like, sorry for the mess, boxes. And that's pretty silly. Most people would reschedule their move if they were having major brain surgery, but I guess she really had to move. Dr. Wolf asks how she's doing. She says she's fine, but then he gets her to admit that she's not super great, and she can't connect with her kids. And he's like, well, if you close your eyes, imagine them, can you? And she's like, yes, I do. Then we're at home with Dr. Wolf. He gets a phone call. And the next thing we know, he's driving his motorcycle, and we see Hannah's kids being taken away by Child Protective Services because she left them out in the rain, like one time. I don't think that they're that efficient. I don't know who called the neurologist, but that's what we see. We get a flashback where Dr. Wolf is talking to his mother, who's basically saying, don't talk about your father's mental breakdown. And that's probably why he is not talking about his neurological condition at work. This flashback also gives him the spark of insight to drive Hannah to her childhood home. He uses the interns. Dana, who has the magic tech skills, figures out her address. They surprise Hannah, the beautiful redhead, by driving her to her house. And she's like, whoa, my house, this is my childhood house, but it's been replaced by an imposter. And this is also something that happens to people with capgras. By the way, if I didn't mention it already, she has capgras. Capgras is sort of like the mirror version of prosopagnosia, which is known as face blindness, because with capgras, you have your brain, one of your visual pathways is able to recognize this person, like, as my child, but a subcortical route that is more, is not making the connection, and you're not feeling the feeling of warmth. You don't feel like the upwelling of love that you expect when you see that person. Prosopagnosia, interestingly, we recognize people. I mean, we don't recognize people, but so that pathway, the conscious visual recognition pathway, is not working, but the subcortical sort of emotion pathway is working. And often you get a galvanic skin response. Even though we'll say we don't know them, our body is saying, yeah, they're at least familiar, So different pathways are broken in prosopagnosia versus capgras. They don't explain this, though. Wolf checks in on Hannah in the hospital and sees her bed is empty. And he's like, oh, no. So he hops on his motorcycle, and he literally intercepts her as she's about to drive her car off a bluff. And she's like, how did you know I would be here? And he said, well, you mentioned the bluffs earlier. That is not a good answer, but she takes it. Wolf gives her a pep talk, and the next scene, we've got Hannah in the hospital. She's blindfolded. The social worker's there. The kids are there. Is the mom going to reject them and scar them for life? No, because they have her blindfolded, and she hears their voices, and she hugs them, and everyone's happy. And then we get a voiceover and a montage that explains how she's going to live her life, obviously not blindfolded. They give her special glasses, which, alter her vision somehow. They say that she's going to hear the kids before she sees them in the morning in order to get that link firing before the visual information doesn't work, and maybe you can rebuild the visual link. I don't think they actually say this, but this is plausible, and it's what they do with capgras. Okay, then we have the dumbest line in the episode, no offense writers, but Carol and Wolf are having a chat, and Carol says, it's a gift, right? Your face blindness. It makes you look so much deeper. You see the stuff the rest of us miss. Okay, I'm face blind. I talk to a lot of other face blind people. None of us think that our disability is a gift. Most of us. There was one or two people, but the vast majority would really like to give back this gift and return it because it would be a lot better to be able to recognize people. I think it is true that Dr. Oliver Sacks was incredibly observant, but it's because he trained himself to be observant. His parents were very observant. They were all physicians, and it had nothing to do with his face blindness. And if anything, in my opinion, face blindness is going to make you treat people like non-player characters because everyone looks the same, like Antarctic penguins. Anyway, final scene. This is the big shocker. Dr. Wolf finally goes in to talk to the chief medical officer, and it is his mother. Anyway, this has been fun. Come back if you want to hear about other episodes and recap. And I gave this episode like a B minus, a B minus. The first scene was amazing. Capgrass, I get why you would choose it, but you didn't really exploit it for its links to face blindness. They had some really silly coincidences in the episode, and I'm not that excited about the intern's one personality trait situation, but it's a good foundation. I think they'll find their footing, right?